And thank you for joining us here. The theme today is pollinators, because next week we have Australian Pollinator Week. So we'll be talking a bit about pollinators today and the important role they play in not only our whole food supply, but in the myriad of life that actually supports us. Bees are these incredible little pollinators, and there's all sorts of bees, not just the European honeybees like you see foraging here, but all sorts of native bees that get around in your garden, and they're all essential to do their bit pollinating to help all of the species be able to reproduce. And that's vitally important to us in our food supply. Yeah. Species is a great thing to do, and you get to watch these native pollinators come into your garden. It's great also if you've got children. That a beautiful piece of education is to really start looking at pollinators and looking at what they're doing. Planting purple flowers. You can see that bee just pollinating here, sticking its head right down inside the flower. Size but heavy, and somehow they manage to fly with that amount of pollen back to the hive in order to use it. But all the while they're spreading pollen from those same type. The bees, what they'll go to one. Be answering questions as well, so if you've got questions, please put them in the comments below. We'll get to answer. On there. So this hive while we continue to answer questions. What I'm doing is just turning this key for the honey to okay, and here's the honey. So as you're thinking of your questions and putting them in the comments, let's just for those that are just tuning in, we are talking pollinators and the importance of them. We've got some great initiatives going on. Australian Pollinator Week next week. Stay tuned, we'll put links in below. There's also a great webinar coming up about the bee-friendly gardening initiative. It's something that not just farmers can get involved in, but we're going wider there with people with their backyards, with their bee-friendly zone, which means they're doing things people thought under your house, or you can get with mud and stack them, like cut the old cardboard milk cartons up to give you a little container, stack them with mud, and you can make little areas for the blue-banded bees. So some bees need earth to nest in, other bees need a reed or a tube, and other bees just need some mulch. So all of these things are good things to set up in your garden to support all of our native pollinators that don't form colonies like this, but just need a place to lay a few eggs and raise a few young. We do have a native bee that does form colonies called the, well, it gets called the sugar bag bee, and we've got the oldest living culture still harvesting from those hives. The oldest living culture of honey harvesters in the world is still going here in Australia, harvesting the sugar bag bee. Wow, this is filling up quickly. As much honey as the European honeybee we see here, but nevertheless it's very interesting honey, and they also get called stingless bees. Tetragonula carbonaria.
Sounds like an Italian seafood dish to me, Cedar. Hey, Cedar, will native bees invade a European bee?
Bee. I have seen the native sugar bag bees
Capped.
Okay, so the whole idea with the flow hive is that you can harvest honey without having to take the frames out and go through that process of decapping them and spinning them and so on. So what we did to help achieve that is have these windows where you can see a cross section, and also the windows on the edge. Now, as you might be thinking, how can you tell whether it's all capped in the centre of the hive? Now you can see the capping beneath their feet there, that there's into the situation where you've got honey the bees have gotten hungry and they've eaten some honey out of the centre of the frame, and they're part way through filling it with nectar again, in which case you and whether or not your frames are full. Commercial beekeepers will take honey if it's 70% capped. I think you can be most of the time pretty sure that it's at least 70% capped by looking from the outside. At Blue Moon you harvest some honey that's a bit too liquid, and it just means you need to eat that honey or consume it before. Okay.
Fantastic. Yeah, a few of our listeners are calling in as well, saying it's freezing.
Okay.
Yeah, but look, Nikki's asking, Nikki, if you're still there in Wollongong, they have an outside fire about 10 metres away from the hive. Do you think this will cause an issue for the beehive with the smoke?
No. The bees are from the beekeeping practices that's been going on for a long time, and a little bit of smoke from nearby fire won't affect them. So you should be good to go there.
Fantastic. Tanner Miner is calling in from the all year round, basically.
So here we are in the USA, and we're in our springtime, you're in your fall, and depending on exactly in your beekeeping at that time. Generally people are making sure that if you're in a colder area that has a long cold winter and snow, you'll be making sure you have a good time to feed them. So you are still beekeeping, but you might be getting a late harvest, an autumn harvest, which in some places they'll get a good autumn flow, and you might be able to still be harvesting, but otherwise you're probably preparing for the winter to come, making sure there's enough stores and feeding your bees if there's not. So yes, it's you'll be beekeeping all year round, but the harvesting will be typically in the warmer months.
They're full of honey, but they don't seem to
nectar, and they're not case. So sometimes you get a bee jumping in the jar, just fish out and put it back on the landing board. And if you get a lot of that activity, then close it up and cover your honey jars. Oh, just missed.
Submerged in its own honey.
Hours, and they're fine when you fish them out. And both in the agricultural lands and in people's backyards, and that way we're creating safe of our native bee species. Some of them only have very short range, and creating a safe spot for them is a stepping stone, especially through our urban landscape, where bees can then connect back through, hopefully, to the wild corridors again. And who knows, your effort might just help save some of these bee species from the brink of extinction. So get involved, follow the links below, and it's all about week here in Australia. Thank you very much for all of your questions, and also let us know what you'd like us to cover. If you want to get started in keeping a hive, a great place to start is looking at the beekeeper.org. We've got a great online course there. Or if you're the type of person that just wants to jump in and get into it, then get your equipment and learn as you go. That's okay as well. Thank you very much for watching, and tune in same time next week.